and the author of Old Money, New South, The Spirit of Chattanooga, America's Trail of Tears, A Story of Love and Betrayal, and the most recent, Hillary and Vince, A Story of Love, Death, and Cover-Up, which is the primary topic of our conversation tonight. I was reading this about the Starr report, and there's the graphic nature of it. And I read this article. So the Starr report, however, went far beyond establishing that the president lied when he denied having sexual relations with Lewinsky, and included sexual details of various encounters that suggest the report also had its purpose to embarrass Clinton and thus limit his effectiveness as president. Okay, that's his interpretation. But it was Judge Richard Posner who wrote the book An Affair of State, The Investigation, Impeachment, and Trial of President Clinton. He said the details are a distraction to anyone who wants to understand and evaluate Clinton's presidency or the role, the function of the president in the American government society. And he tended to write it off as somehow this is because of Starr's animus towards the president, because Starr was, Clinton's team had run Starr's name through the mud in the media. But what I'm suggesting, what I think the possibility is, all this was a choreographed play for us to distract attention away from what was really going on, which was Mena, Arkansas, and that just doesn't involve the Clintons. It involves the Bushes, the CIA, and the deep state.
There's also Chinagate and
yes.
and Ron Brown.
That
those need to be distracted from as well.
Exactly. But again, it's one of these things where the country was fixated on this thing for a year, 2 years. He was impeached for it and acquitted in the Senate. But it was one big distraction away from some of these other things, which I think threatened a lot of bigger people than the Clintons. But you're familiar with the movie Wag the Dog?
Oh yeah.
Now, one of the big keys tip-offs to me that the Monica Lewinsky thing was choreographed was the fact that they have a scandal in that movie that mimics the Lewinsky scandal to a T, even to the photograph where he's hugging a girl in a beret.
Oh.
And the movie was released in the fall of 1997, and the Lewinsky scandal broke in January 1998.
Oh.
So whoever wrote whoever produced the movie, now making a movie about a president being embroiled in a sex scandal in the mid-90s wasn't, you don't have to be a soothsayer to know that, because with Clinton and all, Clinton was elected as a known philanderer. But to get it to such detail suggests to me that the whole thing, not just the scandal itself, but how it would be played out in the press, the pictures that would be leaked. I mean, it really suggests like the whole thing was choreographed.
Yeah, no, I don't have a problem with that. And I totally agree with you. It was a huge distraction. Distraction from what? Is it Mena? Is it Chinagate? Is it both?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the Vince Foster killing? Is it the Ron Brown killing? Is it both? I don't know. But that diversion is a pretty common thing that's done.
And this is how big Mena was. I got this off of Mike Rivera's website. What really happened?
Right. Oh yeah.
And he writes this about Mena. He says the area of the website has been assembled in response to the persistent claims of a few individuals that Mena is a myth, that the CIA never ran cocaine through Mena Airport or laundered the proceeds through various Arkansas financial institutions, including Morgan Guarantee, Madison Savings and Loan, Worth and Bank, and most importantly, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority. That such activities took place at Mena, among other locations, should hardly be surprising, as read through most newspapers shows that government connections to drug running are not only commonplace, they have become the inevitable symptom of our totally corrupted times. And I think that explains, could be a possible explanation why Vince Foster was murdered, because this would, although he may be blowing the whistle on something that may first appear to be totally unrelated, it is all related. Because you have all these financial connections and governmental connections. At each stage of the game, whether it's the DEA, the FBI, or the Pentagon, they're all of elements within these agencies or departments that are compromised, that are involved in this criminal activity. And it's called foreign policy. So,
have you heard the theory from James Norman?
Not offhand. What is that one?
He was editor for Forbes magazine,
mm-hmm.
and he he had a big investigation where he came up with they were sources off the record, unfortunately, but they were like intelligence forces, CIA, that sort of thing. And he said that Foster, from the very beginning, was involved in crafting the software that Israelis and others used, financial software that had a back end kind of.
Is this Inslaw?
Yeah, I think it was called Inslaw first, and then it was called Promise.
Yeah, the Promise software.
Yeah.
Prosecutors, research.
Yeah, so Vince Foster was involved in that way back when in Arkansas. And so basically the theory is that, there's several maybe hubs, for this spy software. And one of them was in Little Rock, and Vince Foster was very involved with it. So, he suddenly gets graduated up to White House Deputy Counsel. So that's like a coup for the gangsters, and the spies and everybody else that are involved in this thing. So so now he's at a much higher level. So Norman's, writings, he Forbes wouldn't let him publish his article and his theories. He ended up printing it in a publication called Media Bypass. But he basically said that there was a kind of a group within the CIA that were disgusted by all the payoffs that were going on.
Uh-huh.
And they were, I may not be remembering this exactly correctly, but they were basically leaving some kind of message with various members of Congress and telling them they need to resign or they were going to expose them. And so all these members of Congress were suddenly resigning about this time. And he had another group called the Angel of Death. It started to sound a little weird at some point, but anyway, he connected all this stuff together to Vince Foster and his connection with this stuff, and that Israeli espionage was a key player in it.
Well, that's not, again, if you follow the Promise software and what Danny Casolaro, the reporter who was committed suicide supposedly in West Virginia in a hotel, he uncovered what he called the octopus, and it had to do with this Promise software. And I don't know whose feet he was stepping on. It could have been anybody. When you get into this, level of intrigue and criminal activity, it could have been anyone who decided to kill him. But he's not the only reporter to commit suicide investigating these things. You have Gary Webb and how he met his demise, shot himself twice in the head after he exposed the crack cocaine epidemic connection to Iran-Contra and of course, Mena, Arkansas, where the cocaine was coming through. These things do branch out. That's the financial angle is particularly interesting because that's where you get into this high level malfeasance and fraud that's going on. Some people who are looking at the 9/11 also have looked into AIG's involvement in that firm Marsh McClellan regarding software and it being involved in vast financial fraud.
I didn't find Norman's theory. I'll send you the article on it, but I found it interesting. But it was there. Everybody was off the record. It was all anonymous.
Yeah.
And then the story just kind of sounded kind of weird when he started getting into the Angel of Death, which was another small group that was, it was some more sophisticated version of putting a banana peel on someone's door knob.
Okay.
So it didn't quite ring true to me, but what it did ring true on was it was something big enough to make sense that someone like Vince Foster gets offed. If Israeli espionage is part of the equation, that could be pretty bad.
Yeah. Now, bring it up to the present now. Of course, we have Hillary Clinton, who's presumptive Democratic nominee for the president, and she apparently has been cleared by the FBI. They recommend no prosecution for her email scandal, and again, this another thing where you have a situation where it's an odd scandal because I don't quite understand how secure emails could be so easily transferred over to a non-secure site. But nevertheless, apparently it did happen. But this involves, the Clinton Foundation, which some people have said is just a foreign money laundering operation disguised as a charitable organization. And this might explain why she erased those 30,000 emails, because she was using her office to more or less sell favors to foreign entities.
Yeah, I don't understand it too well, but something to the effect of put $10 million in the Clinton Foundation and we'll put $1 billion worth of weapons in your military.
Yeah, well, basically it works something like, you would, the way the charity would operate, it was kind of like used to conceal cash. What happened was the donors would give to a charity. The charity would then bundle it and give it to the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, some guy out of Canada was one of the key guys doing that.
And so it's because perhaps the emails detailed these transactions, but basically it's the same old story of the Clintons using their public office for their own personal enrichment and peddling their influence. But another interesting story angle to this is it's, at least from my standpoint of electoral politics, it shows just such a tremendous poor judgment on her part, because all those emails that were on a non-secure server, one would have to assume that server was hacked by foreign intelligence. And now these foreign intelligence agencies would have the goods on the President of the United States, which probably isn't a new thing, but, so where do you go with that?
Yeah, I was talking to someone yesterday or earlier today, that Guccifer, who said he easily got into Hillary's emails, that he was found dead in prison a couple of days ago. Virginia prison.
Really?
Yeah.
So add another one on the body count?
Yeah, and I saw where he died, but it's not hit the mainstream media at all, so no one really knows about it. Sometimes because my Twitter feed has people like you on it, I sometimes wonder when I see a news story if I'm the only one who knows about it, or if the whole world knows about it. It's kind of, you're not sure anymore.
Yeah. And you remember back during the Lewinsky thing, those interns that ended up dead with the name M or something, Mahoney, and
who was
Starbucks?
Who was talking about that? Was that Michael Jones was telling you that story?
It wasn't Michael Jones. No, I just remember
that was one of your interviews, I thought, but
it was like, it was supposed to be a robbery where no cash was taken. And the story is one guy was convicted for it. He claimed that he demanded them to open the safe, and she refused to open the safe for him, which I thought was odd. I mean, it's like a die for Starbucks? I mean, okay. That's the claim. But she had been a witness to much of the interns being harassed by Bill Clinton, and she was going to be targeted, I guess, to give a statement or go under oath, and she ends up being shot to death at Starbucks with two other people.
Yeah, actually, I heard this from Mike Rivero on a Ed Opperman podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, Rivero said that what happened was that some information got leaked that there was about to be a big scandal revelation that was going to come out from a intern with the initial M, and so a week before or a couple weeks before the Monica thing blew up, 2 or 3 different interns in Washington that had the initial M were like suddenly strangely killed. One of them was it Mary Mahoney? Was that her name? At a Starbucks, and a couple others like that. So that was a very strange story. The other one that I think was pretty clearly sexpionage was that who was the guy that the congressman who
Gary Condit?
Yeah, had the chick, and 9/11 kind of caused everybody to quit thinking about him. But he had that Jewish gal that suddenly disappeared, and he was. They never talked about this when they talked about it 24/7 on the news. But he was a member of the intelligence committee. Yes,
this is again another good that A&M, these intelligence operatives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he Gary Condit very much, he must have taken some position that somebody didn't like, and next thing you know,
it was Chandra Levy, yeah.
Yeah. Next
And
thing you know, some girl he's messing with disappears.
and I heard that she also understood she was on she also came from the Federal Board of Prisons, and she was involved in semi-connected to Oklahoma City with Timmy McVeigh's trial. That might have been just a coincidence.
Really?
There's some connection to the Oklahoma City thing too.
There's no coincidence there. I'd like to know what that is.
Chandra Levy, I did an interview about Oklahoma City. I think that came up in that interview. I have to get the details on that again. But that's another odd connection there. Because that was the summer of 2000. Was it the summer of 2000 or 2001 when that happened?
Well, it would be 2001 because it was the big top news story until 9/11.
Yeah, because she apparently had something to do with Timothy McVeigh's so-called alleged execution. And she was involved as, I think, an intern or an employee at the Bureau of Prisons. I think I might have the detail wrong on that. Someone involved in his execution, which some people have questioned because he apparently was an intelligence operative that was sheep dipped, and they can fake anything.
Right.
And they didn't have an autopsy, and he was cremated without his family's permission. So there you go.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, back if we'd have had IMDb back then, they might have both been actors on IMDb. Who knows?
Wait, I heard a headline today that Bin Laden's son is vowing to seek revenge for his father's death.
Yeah, boy, I saw that too, man. I thought, man, that I write movie scripts. I've written a few, and my book is written in narrative form. And so as a movie script writer, when I saw that headline, I was like, yeah, that's good. Those guys, they're doing real good when they're coming up with the next storyline. That really makes sense. You got to have someone with a good, strong motive, and someone that ties into previous work, and you don't want to just give up all that work, because Bin Laden was a really good boogeyman for them. So yeah, bring up the son.
Well, the headline should read, "Son of former CIA asset vows revenge."
There you go. Alleged son.
Yeah. I'd like to see that they have some like weird picture, where he's on a beach somewhere, and I guess nothing will add up. The angle will be off or something. And
yeah, well, this is not quite related, but it is. But I'm thinking about doing some podcasting myself, and one of the questions I want to start asking various people like yourself, interview them, and that is really two main questions. One is, where do you get your good sources? I mean, you just can't watch mainstream TV or mainstream sources anymore. You just can't trust them. I mean, you can look at them, but it's got to come from somewhere else. And so what are they and how do you find them? And that's one question. And the second question I have is when you're doing alternative media research and trying to figure out what's going on, like we're doing, what is the ultimate purpose? And it's a philosophical question that I think probably comes down in large part to your calling. Where God places you in this puzzle, but it's a difficult question to answer. It's kind of like the old question: why do you heal people? Why do you pray for someone to be healed if we're all going to die anyway? I mean, there's an answer. There's a theological answer there, and there's a good answer, but it's not easily answered.
Yeah, for me, it's a form of therapy, maybe a little bit of vanity. But you take in so much information over the years, you got to start, I guess, spewing it out again with your own interpretation. I mean,
it certainly can't be just therapy. I mean, you've got to have a belief that what you're doing is somehow going to contribute to making things better.
Yeah, well, the first thing in solving the problems is trying to figure out what's going on and talking to. You spend so much time reading people's work and, the better part of 15 years. And then you realize that you get over the technologically hurdles, which are fairly easy if you run a simple show, which I do, technically from a technical standpoint. And after so many years of doing research, this stuff sort of just accumulates in your brain, and you're able to kind of see the bigger picture and understand things. This is why I have to have some sympathy for people who don't understand these things. They haven't either found the time or taken the time to look into these things, because it's very hard to connect the dots and understand the bigger picture if all you do is relying on mainstream media or academia, establishment sources for the information, which are designed to deceive you and misinform you, get you asking all the wrong questions. And I run into that too, because you realize when you come across talking to people who really don't look into these things, they really have a fundamental misunderstanding of how the world works. And these are people who are fairly successful in life, But as I think it was Upton Sinclair said, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his paycheck depends on him not understanding it.
Well, yeah.
And we have our system, I think, where a lot of people are running around doing nothing of any value, making money doing it. And that's why I think Buckminster Fuller said that, how you have too many people just doing worthless work, especially here in the United States. And they, whether, that's, lawyers and bureaucrats and judges and officials and people servicing those industries. So we're living in a system of it's almost like we're living in a system of just one lie after another, just one deceit after another. And when you start investigating, looking into it, and pulling on those strings, and it starts to unravel on you, that's how I felt when I started. I have to stop just thinking. I have to talk to people about these things. And if I'm talking to them, I might as well record it and put it out on the internet and let other people listen to our conversation.
But what is the degree to which you think it might make a difference? Are you under any illusion that our society could be a whole lot better and be free of these lies, or are you operating under some form of, this is just a small light that I can shine and a remnant of us can hold on to the truth before Jesus comes back?
Well, let me quote George H.W. Bush, 1,000 points of light. No.
Right.
I think the only hope that has is if you get so many people talking about it, you might have some impact, whether it's, if you're not reversing the course, you're delaying it somewhat, and much about life is delaying the inevitable, right?
Right. Well,
there's some value to that. And it's not really given to us how those things turn out, other than the fact that if you are given some insight into what you think is the truth, I think you have an obligation to speak it. And I'm not saying I have a monopoly on the truth. That's why I say what you think is the truth, because my views of things change as I gather the evidence. So I'm always open to revision of my ideas of what's going on or my view of the world. So you're motivated not so much by whether or not it's going to change society, but just as a human being, you're committed to truth, and so you're going to tell the truth. And you have to tell the truth. don't know. I don't know how it works out. I don't know how it all turns out.
That's a good answer.
I do know how. It's like these people who are obsessed on the end times, or Armageddon, or the end of the world. So, well, the world's going to end for us individually, no matter what. We know that. We all die. So whether it's all at once or
many Armageddon.
Yeah. So, so you're faced with the reality of mortality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or demise, and what are you going to do with your time on the planet? And most, I can understand why people want to stick their head in the sand and just want to raise their family and not think about it. I run into that a lot, and that's the emotional. I think the emotional hurdle many people have. A lot of it is also pride. They don't want to, talk to someone in their 50s and they have their worldview shattered. They want to admit that they're clueless about many things,
right?
And if we've had so many generations brought up on complete BS about history, about politics, and everyone gets excited about elections. But when you look into things like Mena, Arkansas, drug running, human trafficking, sexual blackmail, the poisoning the food, the destruction, of our minds through education and toxic entertainment, it's hard to get too excited about a mere election.
Right.
because we see those elections themselves are part of the mind control process. Going in thinking going in and voting makes a difference. To me, that's part of the trick, But, it's, last time I voted was 2000, a presidential election. So,
well, how about that? Yeah, I think part of the solution is to be more proactive about where your information is coming from, and whether it be an easy way to say it is turn off the TV and read a book. But
yeah,
I think today you can say don't just passively receive the information, whether it's
definitely
on the TV or just what kind of shows up on your news feed, but proactively find the places where you need to get that information and deliberately, allow your mind to be informed in a strategic way. And, I think that's a responsibility that we all have, and you can certainly make a scriptural argument for it. And I think that's one of the big keys, because if you just passively just allow it to just come to you, you're going to get a lot of lies. Yeah,
and the mass communication, entertainment, television, it was weaponized long ago, and some say from the get-go, whether it's radio and the motion picture and the TVs. These things are the primary weapons that they control people. When I say mind control, there's a sliding scale. But basically, by controlling movies and music and entertainment, these things kind of shape our worldview about what we expect out of life, what we think life is, and what's pleasant. And so, if you do something simple as just stop watching cable television or stop watching, mainstream news, you neutralize one of their primary weapons. And with that free time, you can convert to more, I guess mentally stimulating or constructive things like reading, which I think is by itself is just a better use of your brain. It develops the brain better than watching. It doesn't put you in a vegetative state like TV does. Then you can spark critical thought, and that's the key. And that,
it's certainly gotten worse with mass communication in the last century. But if you read founding fathers like Jefferson, they say the same thing about newspapers.
Yeah. But at least back then, there were like broadsheets that were labeled partisan. Still papers are like something Democrat, the Republic. They used to be partisan. But I think because people were more literal back then, although there was an element of propaganda to it, people, you had, in the colonial times, you had just under 3 million people in all the 13 states, and yet there are 300,000 copies sold of Common Sense. Think about that. Imagine if you were to sell a book with that same amount of proportion to the population today. So with 1% of the population, you had 300,000 copies sold. So that's equivalent of what, 30 million copies sold in the United States today?
Yeah.
So there was a time when people weren't as addicted to entertainment or amusement as they are today, because this wasn't there. This is why things like amusement parks were developed and movies were developed. This is why I think the techniques of Hollywood have been applied to the news, with special effects and manipulation to construct the news in ways that most people aren't willing to consider. Fake news, So,
Bin Laden, the sequel.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something you have to. I had a discussion over the 4th of July weekend with some family members about that, and talking about, they brought the crazy theories about the no planes theories about 9/11. I said, well, getting off point here. We're not talking about that. We were talking about Building 7. And I said, well, I said, why do people believe there's media fakery? I said, well, because there are some elements to the coverage of that day that do suggest some sort of manipulation or fakery. I don't know to what extent it goes, but there is some evidence of fakery. And I said, like most people, like the vast majority of the world, experience 9/11 on the television through a studio. And studios have the capacity to manipulate what they're transmitting. And they have been caught doing that in the past. I brought out CNN's faking of the Scud missile attacks during the first Gulf War. that was, released, the raw footage was released a decade or so later, 15, 18 years later, when they're filming a missile attack in the studios in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, you can watch it on the internet now. And so, given that knowledge, why did you trust anything you see on the mainstream news as news? Like I said, it should be just as we're getting to the point now where I think much of what we see as news, we have no more reason to believe that it has anything to do with the reality than the latest, B movie action thriller Hollywood produces. I'm not saying everything is. I'm just saying we have reasons. We're epistemologically what's that word? Epistemologically justified in suspecting that what we're seeing isn't reality in many cases.
Yeah, one of the things that I'd like to get better at, and I wonder if it's because of the fluoride in the water or something, but I think specific examples like you just named are really important. I think it's hard for people to get their minds around it. And if you can point out one specific example where the media just outright lied, it helps. Yeah. It helps to say, so it could have happened here, or a place where the government just out and out lied to us, and say, so it happened here specifically, so it could have happened on this one.
Yeah.
A lot of times those specifics aren't right on the tip of my tongue, and I'd like to have like 5 or 10 good ones. I came across a Zero Hedge article that Jay Dyer linked to a couple of days ago in one of his recent ones, but it's like a list of like 40 documented false flags over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Those kind of things are very helpful. Mm-hmm.
And the mainstream news grew out of Office of War Information, OSS, during World War II. CBS, William Perley, Sarnoff, these are all OSS intel officers involved in psychological warfare.
That's interesting. So it wasn't Operation Mockingbird that came in after the fact and started to infiltrate them. They were.
Oh yeah, from the get-go.
From the get-go, yeah.
And even if you go back as the Orson Welles, the War of the Worlds broadcast was an experiment from the Radio Research Project. It was there to study the effects of mass communication and terror. And this is run up to the Second World War. This is getting people ready, getting fearful of the enemy abroad. There were movies like, what was it, Shape of Things to Come, about preparing people for aerial bombardment in the early 30s. And, this is part of predictive programming. This is part of this terror, spreading terror throughout the community to rule by fear. And that's what the news does today. It's all fear. It's all anxiety. That's why you should turn it off.
Yeah.
These shooting incidents, all these things, they're just, and, the latest one down in Dallas is just odd. We're supposed to believe the sniper reacted within a day, staked out a spot, and planned out a sniping to snipe this protest, which these protests, Black Lives Matter, has been linked to George Soros, and NGOs, which have been stirring up civil wars like in the Ukraine. And we all know that in the Ukraine, there were snipers sent in to shoot at the crowd, just to, not by the government, by the opposition.
Or maybe not by
who's paying?
By somebody.
Yeah, by somebody who's paying for this. And the same thing happened in Yugoslavia in the early 90s. Yeah, these snipers being sent to gun people down. And remember Iraq when those SAS officers were caught shooting up the market, and Iraqis caught them. They were British agents, and the British went and broke them out of prison and didn't hear anything more about it. And this is what Blackwater does, right? Or Academy, whatever it's called now. And G4S, right? The guy who allegedly shot up this gay nightclub in Orlando, who's a part of G4S, which is a part of what used to be Wackenhut, which has been linked to all types of dirty little things going abroad. Mercenaries going and shooting people up and, stirring up wars abroad.
I got 3 buddies I have lunch with every week, and we talk about some of this stuff every now and then. Of course, I'm sort of the pushing the envelope, and they're trying to deal with my my challenging views. But so Dallas came up this past Friday, and one of the guys is just deeply troubled by it all, and he said, well, they've got these, 5 snipers, that's pretty intense. And I said, well, I tell you what, I said, let's see how many of them are alive in a week from now.
Yeah.
So it turns out, didn't take but a couple days, but 4 of them didn't actually exist. So there's only 1, and he's dead.
Yeah, what's about this triangulated fire? I said, wait a second. I mean, that happened or not? And all of a sudden you have a changing narrative because you need at least 3 people to do triangulate fire, from what I understand.
Yeah, that's the term. Yes.
Yeah. And then that changes, and they blow him up with a robot.
Yeah.
I mean, is this out of a movie? I mean, I think it might be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's a tough way to go. I put a post on Facebook about a month ago, questioning the Orlando shooting.
Yeah.
And boy, I just got a barrage of it went from calling me all sorts of names, but eventually I was a Holocaust denier because I was willing to ask questions about the veracity of 50 people dying at the Orlando gay disco.
Yeah, and then they, that type of lack of reason, yeah. Well, I think the timeline has 50 people being shot or 49 being shot dead in like 3 minutes or something.
Right.
That's the official timeline. That's the police at 5, because it started at 2 a.m. Then the shooting started at 5:17 to 5:20, and okay. And then of course you have this another case where the media goes through his apartment. Same thing happened down in San Bernardino last year, if you recall, where the media rifles through the alleged shooter's apartment. This is a crime scene.
Yeah, I just think we live in a. I think we live in a country where most people don't really understand the whole concept of crime scenes and constitutional police authority to inspect things and just anything that has to do with kind of the rule of law and how crimes are dealt with and that sort of thing. It's just not. I don't think people are there anymore. I think they've watched so much TV and they've had so much public education that it's just not something they care about anymore.
Yeah, that's what some of these shootings and the high death tolls. I think people's idea of a movie. I think Jay Dyer's talked about this with Chris and John over at Hoaxbusters about how people's experience in these shootings is a Schwarzenegger movie where every shot is a hit. And so you can have these reported high death tolls and no one seems to question them. Or odd behavior or witnesses, lack of blood, lack of any evidence, no ambulances. And again, I'm not there at these scenes, but it goes back to what I stated previously is I just don't trust what I watch on television. I think that's a sound position to take.
I think it's more than that. I think it's not that. I think that they're more interested in the emotions than they are in the facts.
Well, that's the problem with the investigations. So whenever these occurrences or events go down, the media immediately focuses on the emotion of the event and its effect on society. And they don't ask any questions, look for evidence, hold officials accountable. They don't investigate.
Right.
So what good are they? They're just a PR for the government officials.
And nobody's really cares about that either. They just want to get right to the show.
Yeah. And then it's an opportunity, what Patrick Henderson calls police state pageantry. And they always praise the first responders. And that's another thing is you get the worship of the so-called first responder. Whether it's police, firemen, or I guess reserve, military, whoever shows up first, I don't know. But there's no scrutiny of what goes. A good example is, let's say if there really were deaths down in Orlando, is how many were attributed to the response? That's a fair question, right? If they say they bulldozed one side of their building and went in shooting, well, it might be that 50 died because the SWAT team had guns a-blazing. That's a fair question.
Yeah. Yeah, but nobody's really interested in that question. They're
Yeah.
interested in the narrative because it's an emotional narrative, and so that's kind of where it goes.
And becomes the whole thing is like almost like a promotional ad for gay rights. Because you have CNN and another psyop, another opportunity to, there's different angles you can go with that. But it's, again, it's just you're being it's a psyop. And that says all the and if you're keen to the signs of it, they're pretty easy to see. I saw one video where a supposed victim was being carried and then just off camera, they set him down and they both stretch and smiling.
Yeah, that's the video I posted that I got shellacked on Facebook for.
So I guess they can criticize. I can look at that video and question it, and you can yell at me for questioning it, but just answer the question. Is that normal to you? Yeah. So I don't know. Again, these events could be hybrid. They could be partially true. They could be all fake. I don't think they're true to the extent that they're being reported. So it's hard to say what type of operation it is. But I think it's easy to say that we're not being told the truth and we're being manipulated by it. So.
Yeah, I mean, when these things occur, which they seem to be happening more and more, the first thing I want to do is first of all, I don't want to immediately sit there and watch tons of news reports on it. I want to go to my sources and find out what people are saying, because I don't really want to be part of the psyop. I don't want to be part of the whatever the manipulated desire is.
Well,
yeah, and the other thing I want to do is I don't want to obsess over it.
Yeah,
because I want to choose what things in life I'm going to obsess over.
Yeah,
and just because the media has said that this event is the most important thing in the world for the next week, that doesn't make it the most important thing for me.
And it isn't. Within 2 days, no one's talking about it anymore. Let's move on to something else.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I wrote a blog piece talking about who sets the agenda for what we decide what days are important, and anniversaries of 9/11, yada yada, and the kind of stuff. And I contrasted it with what I thought was what ought to be the agenda setter, which is the church calendar, the historic ancient church calendar. And so I've set the rhythm of my life to the church calendar. So I've spent some time meditating on Pentecost about a month ago, and right now I'm looking at the Transfiguration. And in a few months we'll do St. Nicholas and Christmas, and we'll go at all over again. But that's what's going to be the main agenda setter for me. And then I'll look at current news events and that kind of thing here and there, and select which ones are important to me. But I'm not going to let a handful of atheists in New York tell me what's important.
Yeah. Why listen to them? There was in the issue of fakery in the news. This wasn't a big example. It just gives you an idea of what level that the news can be manipulated for whatever reason. Peter Levenda, he's the author of Sinister Forces.
Yeah, don't know that one.
And he was giving a story, giving an account where he was in, I believe, Malaysia or Indonesia. I forget. I think it might be Indonesia. And he's watching CNN World at the bar that he's in. And CNN World is reporting on a riot occurring there in the city he's in. And in fact, just around the corner from where he is. Okay? And he goes out to look around, nothing's going on. I mean, he can see what's going on. It's just normal. Nothing's going on. They're reporting a riot.
Oh, I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Now, you can do a lot with manufactured news. If you want to short a government's, like Indonesian bonds or stocks, and all of a sudden there's a report of political unrest in that country, in a few seconds, if you short enough bonds, you can make a heck of a lot of money. Now, intelligence agencies have been invested in the stock market. Okay, so this is another way that an intelligence agency or another criminal outfit or criminal outfits or whoever who's in the know who gets a peek into this can make a lot of money by providing bad intelligence. And this was one of the problems with the intelligence agency from the get-go was one of the criticisms. I think the founder of the first director of Central Intelligence was Admiral Hancock, and he was run out because he was deemed incompetent. But the reason why he was deemed incompetent was he wasn't really big into operations, because he said it was a conflict of interest to have an agency provide intelligence and do operations, because pretty soon they'd manufacture the intelligence to justify the operations, or do the operations to create the intelligence to achieve some ulterior, objective, some secret objective of the CFR or something. But this is what you get. What I'm getting at here is, if you can just report that something's happening somewhere, you can short stock markets and make a lot of money. So
yeah, I had a similar thought here. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and this is where we had the Chattanooga shootings.
Mm-hmm.
And it took place in a strip mall 4 minutes from my house.
Oh, okay. That was when the recruiting center?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I drive by it, a couple times a week on my way to work when I go that way. But but I got to thinking about it the other day when I was driving by. There was no difference for it happening here in Chattanooga or it happening somewhere in, Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it all takes place on the TV. I think there's a little monument there right now. And I think, when it was happening, some groups of people came by and, prayed or, did what they did. But there's really, because, and then it's even more, distant than that, and what we've already talked about, which was within probably minutes, the feds took over that case. Mm-hmm. And so everybody in Chattanooga, reporters, medical people, coroners, investigators, they're out. It's all military, and everybody is getting their press releases and their cues from the military and their information. So Chattanooga really didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah. And this, again, all the local authorities are cut out, so everything's controlled. It's that closed loop that I talked about earlier. And so there's no scrutiny, and all the information is controlled. And in that environment, you can have an event completely staged. It's practical. You can see it happening, and they have the incentive to do it. If you doubt that, I know that people have suspicions regarding 9/11, other events. We do know the 93 bombing the World Trade Center was an FBI sting operation related to that, so we have that. But in terms of early planning, we have the Operation Northwoods document, which was submitted to President Kennedy in 1962 by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was Lyman Lemitzer, and he proposed fake and real attacks in the United States, and I think centered mostly in southern Florida, to justify an invasion of Cuba and blame it on the Cubans, Cuban communist terrorists. And involved in that was, one was replacing a plane with a drone aircraft and having it shot down and blaming it on Cuban MiGs and claiming they were victims, students, American students on board that plane, dead. Presumably this would have required crisis actors, like fake, whether in print or electronic media, there'd be fake stories planted of grieving families, right? So all that's in the planning. This is proposed to the president in 1962. Of course, Lyman Lemitzer, Kennedy that fired him or transferred him to NATO, where in a few years the Gladio would go live in Europe. These false flag attacks in Europe, which are now confirmed false flag attacks, where intelligence agencies working with the P2 Lodge, this Masonic Lodge in Italy, and other secret societies were staging false terrorist attacks throughout Europe and blaming it on Red Guard communists to create a strategy of tension to maintain cohesion in NATO. And that's known now. It's out there. No one really disputes this now. It was done. So why would we think that those same entities or agencies wouldn't plan similar attacks at home? to achieve a similar political objective, whether it's a strategy of fear or,
And Naomi Wolf points this out in a video I've posted a few times, but just 3 or 4 years ago, Congress passed a law that it's no longer illegal to do propaganda on the American people.
That's right. The Smith-Munt Act or something they repealed, I think it was. Well, of course, that isn't to say prior to that the government was involved in propagandizing the American people, but the fact that they out and about get rid of the law.
But doesn't it seem like it's been ratcheted up since?
Yes, and that might be because it's one of these things where it's almost like that memo that Kenneth Starr wrote when he worked for William French Smith. And, why would they bother doing this? Why, because I guess they were ratcheting it up, and they guess some people within the agency thought they might face legal exposure if they're actually flying in cocaine directly from Central America into the United States, landing at an aircraft, like places like Mena, Arkansas, where they might get caught. So they needed that protection because they were ramping it up. So I guess maybe this is an example where this might explain all these events that are going on now. Yes, the people say, well, listen, if we're gonna start doing this on a weekly basis, we don't want to face a legal penalty for this. So yeah, you got a point there. They've ratcheted it up. So there you go. That's what it seems like. It's almost like a weekly event where it's almost like, okay, another event.
Yeah, that's one way we can have hope, isn't it? Is that at some point you get so desensitized. I mean, they have to keep increasing the number of people killed and increase the rate of shooting events. So at some point, won't the people just won't react anymore?
Well, a good sign is another good sign is that the world isn't as crazy as they want it to appear. That there aren't people out there who really want to go out and shoot at people and harm people. People that are doing this are being paid. That's a relatively few amount of people. And so they have to, create these staged events in the hopes of riling the people up, So, again, it sounds crazy. As I said to you off call, we live in a crazy world. That's why it sounds crazy. So.
I hear you.
So anyway, anything you want to say before I let you go?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. I don't think we've plugged the book except the very beginning. It's called Hillary and Vince, A Story of Love, Death, and Cover-Up.
Where is it available?
Amazon. Just type Hillary and Vince in the Amazon search engine, and just remember Hillary has 2 L's.
Okay. And you have a website?
Bluebridge.com, BLOO bridge.com. I write about other things too. I've got some articles on there that I do. I write several things about Eastern Orthodox Christianity. That's kind of my gig. I grew up with a fundamentalist pastor, but I became Eastern Orthodox about 15 years ago.
I saw your piece on Soul East about monarchy.
Yeah, I wrote a piece about looking at monarchy and democracy from a biblical perspective, and that got some chatter. So yeah.
Yeah, I added a comment there that said, even from a libertarian standpoint, the Christian monarchies of yesteryear were more fiscally disciplined and respectful of individual rights than today's Masonic democracies, just by the numbers, if you look at it.
No, I saw that, and it made a good point. What's the guy's name? Is it Hoppe?
Hans Hermann Hoppe. He's a libertarian. He wrote a book called Democracy, the Goddess That Failed. And he makes a very good argument behind democracy. He basically says that of monarchy, he says, in a monarchy, you have a chance of getting a good leader. In democracy, you don't have a chance of getting a good leader.
Yeah, exactly.
But he pointed out the fact that under monarchies, the government expenditure never exceeded 10% of GDP. That was like in Russia, which was the authoritarian, autocratic state. Whereas in the West, under the Christian monarchies, you had usually in peacetime was anywhere from 1% and 3%. And they all respected the gold standard. So there is enough. So really from a libertarian standpoint, he makes the point that monarchies make more sense than democracy.
Yeah, well, that article I just started by saying things are so insane now. I mean, we've got Satan being worshipped at the Olympics ceremony, and We've got gay marriage and transgender bathrooms, and it's just gotten so nutty now that we really got to think outside the box. And I think we've got to turn over every single rock, and monarchy's one of them. So that's kind of how I started that article.
Well, and of course the Illuminati, the New World Order, or whatever you want to call it, I think their objective was the destruction of throne and altar. I think back in 1776 when they started.
Yeah, they're doing pretty good.
They're pretty good. So, and of course they sell this they use the language of freedom, which is an old trick, right? So.
Yeah, but to try to get positive, I am Eastern Orthodox, and Russia is a big stronghold for that. And the boomerang effect in Russia is pretty encouraging. I mean, they saw the worst of the worst. It got as liberal and godless and murderous as it possibly could there, and they came back to Christianity. Mm-hmm. And we've seen a revival in Russia. We've seen 25,000 churches built, and we've seen, people are turning back to the church. They teach Christianity 101 in the public schools there. It's just a movement back towards God. And so that's pretty encouraging. So that's one of the things in the midst of a lot of craziness that we can be positive and hopeful about.
And one thing you got to remember, that godless Bolshevism was a Western import.
It sure was. The Western bankers from New York.
That and Coca-Cola and blue jeans. So.
Be careful, Chattanooga's
I know.
That's where Coca-Cola bottling started here. I wrote a book about it.
I know. That's why I said that. You heard that book.
Tread light. Oh, okay. Tread light.
But back then they used pure cane sugar, right?
They actually used cocaine too.
There you go. Yeah, that's right. Coca-Cola. So, well, listen, I want to thank you for spending so much time with me tonight. It was a great talk. I know we wandered a bit, but I thought we would, given the nature of the discussion, the subject.
Well, yeah, I like hearing you wander. You're like Jay. You got a near photographic memory. You remember all these things, man. And you're able to tie them together.
That's quite a compliment. Thank you. Enjoyed your book. I did. It's a fun read, a very quick read, and for me it was a refresher course because I just remember all that was going down, and I do like the road you take with it because it does. I think it is a microcosm into how some of these bigger scandals are handled and the cover-ups, and gives you an idea of how these things are so easily controlled and why the American people are so easily deceived in these things. So right. I highly recommend it. It's a quick read. It's worth your time, and it's a cheap read. So it's buying it won't send you to the poorhouse. It's worth your time and money. So
appreciate that.
It's a good work. Well, Dean, thanks a lot for being here tonight, and we'll talk again soon, maybe. I'll follow you at Soul of the East, and maybe one of these days, if you want to expand your thoughts on monarchy versus democracy, and if you can read that book, I don't know if Goddess, Democracy, the Goddess That Failed, you might enjoy that book, so I highly recommend it. Maybe we can have a discussion about that.
Could be good. Yeah, you can take a look at my Blue Bridge site and some of that stuff on orthodoxy. You might find interesting as a podcast too. I don't know how much religion you do, but that's a area where I have some content to deliver.
Yeah, take a look at that. Yeah, I know Jay does that stuff too. He's into the I guess Eastern Orthodox or
right. Yeah, exactly.
And there's a lot of interesting thought there at Soul of the East because of what's happened in the West, particularly the Roman Catholic Church and some of the, I think might be the Masonic influences that have infiltrated the church and created a lot of problems in the West. So anyway, thanks.
All right.
And good night, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Tim.
Take care. Bye-bye.